Okay, welcome to March 2021 Linkerd Steering Committee meeting. I'm going to share my screen. I have some notes.
I don't think you're recording, if that's your plan.
I believe I am.
Oh,
See the recording
That's what,
dot now.
that's what
oh
Zoom is
there
telling
you
me.
go.
Okay, so looks like we have Oliver, Chris, Christian, me, William King declined, and we'll see if Justin shows up. Okay, so what I was going to propose we do this time, although I'm definitely open to um, changing this up. Say hi, do a little production check-in. Like just hear how things have been going on your folks's end, especially since I know Christian just upgraded 3,000 pods across like 3 versions or something. Have Oliver give a little update on 2.10. I do have we ran this little Linkerd user survey, which might be interesting to look at. And I figured we should share that data somewhere. Discuss briefly graduation and then roadmap review. I saved that for the end because I figured everything else would probably be pretty quick.
Also, I think the roadmap preview is going to be more of a check-in at this point, just because
Yeah.
we haven't gotten 210 out, so we're not really in full planning swing yet.
Yeah. Okay.
We
Well.
can check in on that and then go from there.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
there'll be more to cover next time, basically.
Yeah. All right. So, how's Linkerd going? We'll start with Chris. You still running it? Still
Yes,
working?
still working. Uh, so no news is good news as far as I'm concerned. I don't think about Linkerd too often, which is great. It's just quietly adding value in the background. We are looking to move to, I think it's 1.9 because we're going to start doing multi-cluster or 2.9. Yeah, I don't know the versions very well. So we're going to start that, I think, this month because it's already March.
I mean, there is a
Um,
1.9. You could move to that if you wanted to.
I don't think that's the right one.
Yeah, you
And
might be
we're
surprised.
also integrating with Jaeger. So we're rolling out Jaeger across our environment now. So I'll probably have feedback on the Jaeger integration once that's done. So we're doing Jaeger and then we're going to go to multi-cluster after that.
Okay.
But yeah, not really anything too exciting going on, which is
So you're
good
you're
so
on
much.
281 now.
That sounds right.
Okay.
Yep.
Christian, what about you? How's your massive upgrade experience?
271 to 281 was super. It was not a single issue. So that just went super smooth. We used the Linkerd upgrade command on the CLI, which we before tested with kind, as we had the issue that we were coming from a very early version of Linkerd, as you may know. I mean, we were coming from 2.71, but as we started very early in our journey, we had a custom bespoke Helm chart. And also we had this issue with the scale due to the many pods that we couldn't in 271 set the required resource requests and limits on certain components, which is what Lutz then contributed. So with the new chart in 2.9, we finally can do that. So our path was 271 to 281, as it's recommended to not jump over a major version. And then once we're on 2.9, the idea is now then to go back to our GitOps approach and use our pipeline rollout through the Helm chart again. So yesterday we did the jump to 281 on the control plane, and that went smooth. Then we started rolling over all of the deployments and stateful sets in all the environments. Took about, I think, 2 hours or 3 hours maybe, as we did it a bit by bit, starting with integration environments and then graduating to production environments. So that went well. And today we then did the same from 281 to 294. Control plane, again, super smooth. First environments also super smooth. And then we were bitten by basically a Redis issue that's also I think I'll link this just recently in the Linkerd chat. That is basically about the, let's say this one here. So we ran across that and we had a bit of a downtime kind of in one of our environments due to that went unbeknownst to us. So we tried to disable Linkerd and that Redis deployment. For some reason that didn't work. So now we tried to skip the pods, and for some reason that didn't do the trick. And we're now just disabling Linkerd for the time being for the Redis in this particular case, which is a bit weird as we have a identical deployment for the Redis that is just used by other components in the stack, and that is working perfectly fine. So for the time being, we're going to disable Linkerd for that particular Redis and then try to research the issue. Other than that, Linkerd 294, as far as I can tell, until now is also working fine. The next steps then are to switch back to the Helm chart, which in our tests worked fine, except for some config map that we can fix, I guess, that is rendered in a bit of a bad way. So it's the upstream Linkerd Helm chart that we then enhance with an extra chart that we have, because we require some extra vault secrets, which is a custom CRD type we have for the injection and consumption of HashiCorp vault secrets. And then the final step will be to switch over to Cert Manager for the certificate management. That's then probably going to happen next week or the week after.
Okay, I tried to capture little bits
Yeah.
and pieces of that, but feel free to edit this doc.
Sounds
or leave
about
comments
right.
if it's all right.
Yeah, so that's the story. And the other thing we're working on is getting the metrics actually in a workable shape with the sheer massiveness of the environment. So the way we're going now is to disable the Linkerd Prometheus, and then instead we have a multi-tenant setup with different Prometheus per tenant. A tenant in our case is a team or a product team owning one product that we have. They have their own monitoring stack, and they can then consume the proxies, the proxy metrics from their namespaces they own. So we have a mechanism to track which namespaces they own. They can then use that for alerting in Prometheus, and then from there, with a relatively short retention, it gets then forwarded to Thanos for a long-term storage in a central place. So that's basically the next thing to handle.
Yeah.
And after that, we will see.
After that, you can upgrade to 210.
Oh, hopefully. Which will then be a lot simpler as we are back in our normal. Oh, actually, there was something breaking, right? From 2.9 to 2.10 in the Helm chart, I guess.
I think we have that sorted out, but we'll get the 210 scoop from Oliver.
Yeah,
Then we
it'll be
have to
another
jump.
migration. I can talk about that in a minute.
Okay, and then we have to bump it to a proper Helm 3 installation. Actually, that's also going to be interesting.
Well, sounds like you got your job cut out for you. I can't fire you now.
Probably not.
Justin, we were just doing like a quick check-in state of Linkerd in your environment. Everything okay? How any upgrades? How do they go? So on and so forth.
We're at 2.8.1 in our non-prod environment. We were going to upgrade to that in prod, which is currently on 2.7.1. That was scheduled the week that the snowstorm happened. And we've been, focused on other things since then. The plan is next week to upgrade to that. And then From there, we're working on building out or finishing building out our Dark Canary cluster, which will allow us to replicate production traffic into a safe environment. And then we're going to keep that one version ahead. So that one will be running on 2.9 to get ready for the next upgrade. But that's a few weeks out. Other than that, no issues. Just how I like it. I don't have to think about Linkerd too much in my day-to-day.
Actually, for us, that's been one of the issues. Basically, it was just working so well that we kind of didn't really. Yeah, kind of.
I can fix that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Maybe when we get to the 210 section, we'll talk about how we're going to fix that for you.
Yeah, like a built-in chaos monkey that just a Rust chaos monkey scrambling some bits.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks for that, folks. That's really helpful for us to hear. Okay, so speaking of 210, Oliver, do you want to give a quick status? I think when we planned this meeting a month ago, we were expecting to be like a week after releasing 2.10, and obviously a bunch of stuff has come up.
Yeah, and actually, if you wouldn't mind, I'll take the screen for a second. Kubernetes commands real quick. Okay. So I have the release notes up here, and I have a control plane. I just wanted to kind of give you a peek at what everything looks like. So there's actually a lot changed, which is probably something we're going to try to do a little better in 2.11, is to keep things a little bit smaller. But the big change is splitting up the control plane and to have a core control plane versus kind of the monolithic control plane that includes the web interface and Prometheus and TAP and all that stuff. And so here's a 2.9 cluster we see. It's just booting up, but we see a lot more components in the default install, Grafana, TAP, things like that. Now I'm running an ARM for one. I was just testing things in our multi-arc environment. We see a much smaller control plane now. And so when you do a Linkerd install, you'll just get these 5 pods that are really essential to running things. And I think in 2.11, we'll be able to consolidate this even more than it is today. The other big change that we've focused on is what we're calling the opaque ports feature. And so we've actually removed all of the default skip ports. We no longer skip any ports by default. And instead, we have a default set of opaque ports. And so opaque ports mean that when the proxy gets traffic and discovers that it discovers the server, and if the server is marked opaque on a given port, we will not try to do any sort of HTTP discovery on the outbound side. And to do MTLS, we'll actually route things in another port. And so we'll do proxy to proxy MTLS, and then decrypt it, read some metadata off the connection, and then route it as we expect. And so that feature is useful for doing any non-HTTP traffic can be marked opaque, and it'll be good. We'll do less work on the connections. That means we'll do MTLS for all of that TCP traffic, and it also enables the multi-cluster TCP support. And so the other really big step forward in 2.10 is changing multi-cluster to be based on this connection header and this negotiation. Previously, multi-cluster only worked for HTTP communication, but now this should work for arbitrary protocols. Should be able to work with multi-cluster. Then, if you want to get into where everything's gone, we've added subcommands. And so where things like Linkerd stat are now Linkerd viz stat, and just actually start up, we need to do Linkerd viz install. And this will actually run Prometheus. It has its own Helm chart. So now there's a Helm chart for the core control plane. There's a separate Helm chart for the viz components. This actually includes, I think I mentioned last time, a new set of webhooks. So now there's a tap injector, like the proxy injector, but will run secondary. So we'll wait for the proxy to be injected and then add tap configuration only when it's present. So that means anything installed by default will not have tap enabled proxy-wise, and will only enable it if the tap injector is configured to inject on those pods, which will be the case by default, but you'll be able to kind of turn that off if you don't want tap on things. Again, focusing on like minimizing the security surface area and minimizing the performance overhead when these things aren't absolutely necessary. So we're hoping that, especially in multi-clusters, a similar extension. So these all become namespaces that have labels. Based on those things, we can actually we've made check aware of all of these extensions. Jaeger is a separate extension. It's no longer bundled in the kind of core concerns and core control plane. And those things, it also sets up for writing kind of third-party extensions, and the CLI will integrate with that. So we use the same tricks that kubectl and Git use for plugins. So if you have, linkerd-foo in your path, the linkerd-foo extension will be enabled, and you'll be able to use that in the CLI. We hope that things like cert manager may integrate here. Like I said, we've done a Jaeger integration here, and there's probably some other things. As we were talking to someone at a company I won't name yet because I don't think they're public about it, but they've been using Linkerd as part of their managed Kubernetes service, and they are interested in doing trust anchor rotation as an operator. And so it's something that doesn't fit in the core control plane. We wouldn't want that to be in the core Linkerd, but would definitely make sense as an extension to say, well, I want to have the ability to roll all my pods to update trust anchors and trust roots and do that in a managed process. That would be something that would make sense as an extension that could fit in the Linkerd check. And so we're trying to carve some spaces into Linkerd, especially in the CLI, for other Linkerd focused integrations to live. With that, let's see, is there anything else that I've missed? With that probably comes a lot of upgrade notes that we're trying to nail down and make sure we've gotten correct on, because especially with the opaque ports change, or the skip ports versus opaque ports change, that may bite some folks, especially if you're talking to off-cluster resources. Like if you have a non-Kubernetes MySQL database, you'll need to go add the skip ports in back for these things so that they can be reached without detection. But these are also things that in 2.11 we may be able to make a little bit smoother, but there will be a little bit of cognitive overhead in the upgrade for 2.10.
Yeah, and that skip ports thing actually hit us when we were upgrading, because things that previously, we have some external MySQL calls that previously were just being skip ported automatically that, then stopped working upon upgrade.
I guess the other big things are that some external contributors helped improve caching in the destination service. A lot of folks were seeing weird behavior. I think Finley may have been one of them, seeing weird kind of update lag, especially in the destination service. And I think things seem better now that we've improved caching of node lookups. Yeah, I did. Oh, also, I think we've made Linkerd 08, which is a utility that I wrote a while ago. You can add it to your container images if you think that's appropriate, and that will prevent your application from running until the proxy is ready. Which is especially useful if you do outbound connections on startup. You can get into kind of race conditions of the proxy there. We've actually started using it internally in the project. So in our controller components, we are now using the Linkerd 08 to prevent the pieces from starting until the proxy is available. And we've also added shutdown support for that. So that will enable mostly cron jobs and jobs and not non-long-lived deployment workflows can now use Linkerd in a way that wasn't really possible before. So a lot of incremental changes, but the big things have been this install split up and making check modular to support the install split up and getting multi-cluster in there.
Part of the reason I was asking about upgrades is because I think this will be a bigger type of upgrade than, 2.7 to 2.8 or even 2.8 to 2.9. So like A, you're going to have a bunch of different Helm charts for the control plane. It's not just going to be in one. B, if you're using commands, a bunch of those have changed. So Linkerd stat, Linkerd top, Linkerd dashboard are now Linkerd viz stat, Linkerd viz top, etc. And then, the change with skip ports and opaque ports means there's a bunch of stuff that you may have to go configure that you didn't have to before. Hopefully not too much, but it's going to be less trivial than some of the other changes.
On the skip ports question, because we use external MySQLs as well, where does that get configured? Is that a proxy environment variable, or how do you add that?
It's part of the proxy init, the init configuration. And so that can be either a namespace annotation, it can be a workload annotation, and I think it can also be a default, a cluster by default. So you could say always skip outbound 3306 as a cluster default. And that means every proxy that gets injected will have the proxy init configured to set up IP tables that way.
Any other 210 questions?
I'm properly afraid now.
Thought I was done.
Well,
Now this.
Yeah, I guess the other kind of maybe some of the internal changes that we've done are to make a lot more of the proxies decision-making connection-oriented. So we started this in 2.9 and really we continue to double down on this, and we'll continue in 2.11, is to try to load up a lot more of the policy and configuration per connection and per target, rather than doing work per request. And so we've seen, for instance, some places where we had memory pressure before have been alleviated by changing things to be connection oriented. And I think we'll continue to do that sort of perf investigation as like a third tier of our, we kind of have like reliability as first tier, feature work, and then a lot of this performance improvement going on in the background as well.
I guess my question would be these things like skip forwarding or skip ports, things like that are due to more complexity being added with the re-architecture. How well documented are they going to be? Are there any other like gotchas, things that might catch us off guard? Stability is our number one concern, and we're paying really close attention to the complexity of our ecosystem as it starts to build out, because we can't have curbside go down, that kind of stuff. So how well documented, how much more complexity is going to be added going forward?
That's a good question. So I think for many users, this will not be it won't be apparent at all, because we'll replace skip ports with opaque ports and the same defaults exist. But there will be a set of gotchas we have to document. We're spending time on the upgrade notes right now, making sure that's really clear as part of both the upgrade notes that go into the release, as well as the Buoyant has a run book that we publish, and we'll make sure that we can be as clear as possible about that. And going forward, I think we'll see, I want to see this configuration evolve a little bit more. And so right now it's very, just this annotation based kind of simple thing. And we can talk about 2.11 in a minute, but I do think that we'll create kind of new CRD objects around that give you this types of ability to configure this. And so I think, if we look forward over the next year, we will be expanding the configuration surface area for folks, especially to implement things like authorization policies. So I think, it's our job to try to straddle the balance of making things more flexible, but also keeping them documented well and tested well, and really investing in things like check to say like, okay, what can we detect in your setup that's gonna, trip you up? And that's, a kind of a dance. So feedback's important. Let us know if things start feeling weird as you try to pick it up. But
Yeah, just ping my team. They've been paying close attention to the conversations going on in the Slack, so they're aware of a lot of the complexity. But just due to the sensitivity, we may reach out and have Charles ride along with us and make sure we don't trip up when we get there.
Yep. Yeah, we're happy to hold hands especially it's a good learning for us to see how other people try and adopt things and where it runs into sharp corners.
Cool. Thank you.
The other thing I would add is
Dark Canary thing. You don't need to worry. Just throw it in the Dark Canary.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that we've been working with some folks at NetApp, and as they want RabbitMQ and MariaDB, and they have their own set of tech there, and we've been working with them to get integration tests implemented in the main repo for their workloads, so that we can have more confidence in our release process that we're not going to trip them up. And so I would kind of push back to you and say, if there anything where you think where one, you've hit problems before, or two, you think you're likely to hit problems, we can work with you to get integration tests so that we can make sure we're ahead of that curve a little bit.
That sounds awesome. Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for us, what became apparent in this massive upgrade we just did is that the variety is really interesting. Like all the different things, as you named them, we also have RabbitMQ, there's Nats, there's like, we as a company also merged, so that added to the mix of things. So that's really difficult to test extensively beforehand. And then also there's the factor of scale. That's something that we learn over and over and over again with anything we do. It's not just Linkerd, it's also a lot of other things that if you really have a dense cluster that has a lot of pods, actually, so it's not your average 10 node 50 pod cluster, but it's a 50 node 4,000 pod cluster, for instance. You run into issues that are not documented, or you just don't see that often. So that's something that we are trying to think about how we can test that beforehand.
Yeah, and I should note that the project has access to Equinix Metal labs. So I don't know if we can spin up 50 nodes. They might yell at us if we do that, but we can certainly start to think about how to leverage those free resources for load testing before release. We kind of do that in a piecemeal fashion, but we could certainly get, if there's, if folks are willing to help us, we can help make that a reality.
It's good to know. We can think about that if we have something where we are especially curious. So one of those items, for instance, was the relatively unexpected thing that we had to crank up the Linkerd proxy in the Prometheus due to the amount of logs of metrics coming in. But yeah.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add is, if you see other open source projects that are doing something that you think is particularly good for, helping with this kind of challenge, we're definitely open to it. The CNCF is the one who's footing the bill for Equinix, and they are willing to invest resources in testing and stuff if we point them in the right direction. It's not like, free, like someone's got to figure out what to be done.
Yeah, sure.
But if there's obvious stuff, that Linkerd could do, we often have the ability to do it.
Yeah, that's cool. The other thing we also noticed today, again, as people were starting to work with this more intensely, is the dashboard. If you have a lot of things, a lot of namespaces, a lot of stuff, but that, I guess. So
yeah, that thing has not been tuned for like reducing its read load on Prometheus.
So people are using mostly it to stitch together the tab commands or something, and then just copy and paste them and use them on the terminal right now. Stuff like that.
Are you asking, how do people normally use the dashboard? Or you're saying this is what people are doing?
This is what people are doing. Yeah. I mean, they also try to look at other things and are patient and stuff, but then there's a 500 or something, and they're like, is this actually showing the real thing now, or am I missing something here?
Yeah. Yeah, well, get some PromQL query logs going in there and submit some PRs.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think generally the dashboard has been demo-driven developed to a large degree, and so there's not really like a front-end architecture that we own there. We'd love for folks to get involved if that's an area of interest for folks, but it's not our core competency, so it kind of lives there, but doesn't get a lot of love from us.
Does the dashboard get removed with the new piecemeal install? Is it part of the Viz?
It's part of the Viz component, so it's not removed, but it's part of the Viz component, so it's not there by default. But,
right.
You're welcome to add it with Viz. And that was a question we get a lot of, like, how do I turn this stuff off? I don't want it. And I'll be like, well, okay, here's the stuff you need, and here's the stuff that you can like be optional with and turn off and on if you want.
Yeah. I can second. The only time I've been booting up the dashboard lately, just because we've exported all the data to Grafana, is to do tap, because I still haven't learned the syntax. So
yeah, exactly.
Maybe we should just make the dashboard do tap. It'd be a lot more efficient.
The tap board.
Yeah, we could have it be the tap configurator. That would reduce the prom load for sure.
Certainly.
Any other 210 topics or concerns? Okay, well, you know how to find us if you need us. Okay, so next I kind of wanted to run through the Linkerd survey results. Before we do that, we're joined today by Kevin Limecooler, who's one of our Linkerd maintainers. Kevin, do you want to say hi and just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hey. As William said, I'm Kevin. I work at Buoyant and primarily on Linkerd. Just kind of joined today. I was curious and hearing how things are working out for you all, and just wanted to listen in and get an idea on what your thoughts were and stuff like that. So didn't really have anything else major to add, but has been good just listening, and especially with getting ready for 210 coming out. So yeah, if you ever have any questions about things, feel free to find me on Slack or Discord. And
which parts of the code base are you responsible for introducing bugs into?
None, obviously.
Okay, good answer. All right.
Kevin's on the East Coast, so if you have problems before I'm awake, bug him.
Yeah, there you go.
And Kevin's actually been doing a lot of work on the destination controllers of the service discovery system, and has written proxy features before, and kind of thankfully works throughout the code base freely. So you can bug him about anything, basically.
Treat him as your personal concierge for any issues that you have. And also,
Kevin quickly mentioned there that we've been hanging out on Discord a bit more, and so I think we aren't in love with Slack, especially from the history preservation point of view. So I welcome you all to join the Discord, and maybe we should even have a steering room there or something like that, so we can sync up more asynchronously.
Yeah, it's a little experimental at this point. We haven't really pushed the community to move over, but we are trying it. Slack is annoying in a lot of ways, so I suspect we'll end up there ultimately. Just a question of how rapidly that happens. Okay, so just briefly, we did send out this survey. I think we have something like 70 responses. And I figured we would at least 72. There we go. I figured we would at least run through the results here. I don't know that there's anything particularly actionable for the steering committee so much as the maintainers. But I did want to expose some of this data. At the very bottom of this are email addresses. So I'm going to try not to scroll to the bottom just to avoid, putting people's emails. Worst case, I guess we can do a little creative editing. Okay, so out of those 72, we kind of, there's a pretty big set of titles, ranging from architect to developer to SRE. I think the biggest one really is SRE, maybe, which is not so surprising, platform engineer, and then and DevOps, and after that, architect. The actual, developers are somewhere in here. And 10% engineering management, never a good sign. Okay, majority of people work on a team. That's 2 to 5 people. After that, gets a little bit bigger. Almost 20%. It's just one person, which is interesting. And then how big is a team of developers that they support? Majority of folks are in the 20 to 100 range. It's actually a pretty broad range. And kind of what you would expect. There's only actually, this also is surprising to me that the 20% of people are using it to support this very small team of developers. We did ask how many Linkerd enabled production clusters you have. This was a slider that capped at 10, so this 10 may actually be something much larger. Like I know Will King has a much larger deployment, who couldn't join us today, has a much larger deployment. This is not differentiated by people who said they're in production and not in production. So I'm guessing a lot of these zeros are people who are not in production. Majority of people running 1, and then you kind of see a long tail out there. I think if you take the average, you remove an outlier or two, you take the average, and you end up somewhere around 1.7. I expect this to change. If we do this again next year, I expect us to flatten out and to see much more, multi-cluster adoption for a variety of reasons. Okay, out of everyone we surveyed, the majority of people are in production, but not, either in production or on the path to production. 12% of people are evaluating it, and then there's a smattering of other responses. And if they are in production, majority of people under 6 months in production. So a lot of new users, and second highest is less than a month. So a lot of new folks coming into the project, which is great. Then there's, some very old people in there. I guess, Christian, you're somewhere in here. I think we had 1 or 2 Linkerd.
I can't comment this, I'm sorry.
Since the 70s.
Yeah.
Okay, we asked a bunch of questions about the metrics pipeline as part of our lead up to, extensions and moving things out into Viz and dealing with all the kind of questions around Prometheus scaling and stuff like that. So majority of people are using a centralized Prometheus and do federation. The next most common was the bring your own Prometheus. And then, there's a fraction of people who just don't have enough of a problem that they do anything besides, using the on-cluster instances. And actually this third-party usage was much smaller than I was expecting. Really just a small number of people who offloaded entirely to a third party. Majority of people are, 4 out of 5 happy with their metrics pipeline. Took them either hours or days to set up. Very, very few people took weeks, or I think one person it took months. Poor soul. How do they share their dashboard? Put an ingress in front of it, or just don't share it at all. And then the third most common is if you want it, just run Linkerd dashboard. Which, I think a lot of this really depends on what size of company you are. If you do share it with other folks, who do you share it with? Platform team, basically other people in this kind of operational role is number 1. After that is the developers. And then, apparently some people share it with their manager. Another thing that was surprising to me was alerting based on Linkerd metrics. Majority of people did not do alerting. I would again want to slice this by, are you in production or not? But I would have expected this to be much higher. Service, I'm going to skip over this one because there's a lot. there's a lot here. I'll share this the survey with you all afterwards. A lot of the comments here are, there is a 1.x user here. A lot of the comments here are things like cert manager and ingress and certs. So we'll see more cert stuff in some of the other freeform responses. Service profiles, majority of people said no, but maybe in the future. A little under 20% are saying yes, and then 9% just don't care. Number one feature request, my rough analysis of this is there's a couple calls for header-based routing, and then a bunch of people asking for cert management stuff. Some of these responses are a little hard to interpret. MTLS, network rules, I guess, is policy. Safe upgrades, sounds great. And then a couple call-outs for circuit breakers. And then I think I don't want to scroll beyond. Oh no, we'll do our NPS score at the bottom. So number one complaint, it's too stable. Someone really cares about open telemetry. Why all these TLS certs we have to think about? Still too buggy. Okay, Oliver, I'll assign that to you. Features are not. Okay, yeah. Missing Kiali. That would be cool. I would love to have Kiali. Helm charts are difficult. Add-ons, I think, is another word for extensions. There's some interesting stuff in here. Unclear error logs. So some things for us to dig through. Why aren't we integrated with GKE? Server speaks first MTLS. I think we will fix that in 2.10. And disappointed you have to configure ports to skip for various technologies. Yeah, I agree. All right, how likely are you to recommend? I'm sure there's some official NPS score, but basically 2 peaks at 8 and 10, and then a handful of other responses. And that's as far down as I want to scroll, because after that I know we get into email addresses and things. So, like I said, I'll send this out afterwards if you want to have a deeper look, but this is what we have after polling 72 people. If you haven't filled it out, please fill it out and give us an authentic NPS score in here. Any questions on this? Or bright ideas for what we should do in future Linkerd versions?
Actually, I had the the topic of alerting on Linkerd and also using those gold metrics as well, because we're not doing as much as I would like to, and I was wondering why that is. I'm not sure why. I'm just seeing the results here, and that resembles what I experience also. I have no idea why, but yeah, I think it's very interesting, because thinking about it, it's actually a super neat way to get going with alerting and with metrics if you have none whatsoever and just get started. I was thinking internally in our internal platform to maybe just crank it up and deliver, I don't know, the dashboards from the Linkerd dashboard, like the Grafana dashboards, as a set of default dashboards to our tenant monitoring stack or something, and just bundling it all together. So as soon as you deploy something, Linkerd is automatically enabled, then that gives you automatically the stuff. Maybe that's what's needed, that we on our end add to the integration into the internal platform. It's maybe too deep into a specific solution for the developer teams to pick it up right now.
Well, one thing I have seen, we did a bunch of kind of one-on-one conversations. One thing we did see was this idea of a safety net, where you as a platform team, you set some alerts that are just across all services. If anything drops below 90% success rate or above 3 seconds, P99 or something, pretty large, then you should know about it. And then you do further fine tuning. The developers get involved, or the service owners get involved in further fine tuning.
It's really weird to me that a lot of the people I talk to, they're like, oh, we use it for MTLS and load balancing, and the metrics, like, we haven't even gotten to yet, which is Like the metrics would be the first thing that I would want out of it, I think, but it's
Yep.
not it's not how people think.
Not actually that surprised, just because there are other ways to get metrics, like from Ingress or whatever. Like we use Apogee quite a bit, and that's become somewhat of a standard for at least the management side of things. And then given how simple it is and how it just works a lot of the time, it's almost like just a free win for security. So you can just, I mean, I tell that to people all the time. Like it's one of my bullet points. All the traffic on our platforms encrypted at all times, and that makes people feel better.
It's encrypted, but authenticated, verified.
And also those things.
Okay, 10 minutes remaining, so I want to make sure we get through the rest of this. Okay, let me talk briefly. I'll give you the update on graduation, which is I've had a bunch of conversations with various interested parties. I think everything is looking pretty good. We do have the maintainers issue that's going to come up that we'll have to talk to. The fact that all maintainers of Linkerd currently are employed by Buoyant, in part because we have hired everyone who is really good at and interested in working on Linkerd. But I think we know, what we want to say there. So it's not going to be a shoe-in. For that reason, I think all of our other metrics and adoption and all that stuff is in really good shape. So I expect to kick this proposal off pretty soon. And I would love to loop you all in and have you do a lot of the driving of that, because I think it would be a really strong signal of everything we're trying to achieve with Linkerd to have the users be the ones pushing for graduation rather than the maintainers. So expect some strongly worded emails from me encouraging you to get involved in this process once it does kick off.
And we do expect that if this is successful, we'll have a lot more attention on the product. It means more testing, more resources from other companies who want to invest there and help us out.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good for everyone. Okay, Oliver, do you want to do a roadmap check-in?
Yeah, so Justin, you were in here in the beginning, and I know I owe you some more groomed milestones in the GitHub backlog. Because we're still kind of sprinting to get 210 wrapped up, I have not gotten as far through that planning phase as I want to. But the next focus for us, one is there's gonna be polish, especially on docs and check, and as we get 210 out there and get initial feedback, there will be probably, I'm expecting a 210.1 in the next month or so that addresses whatever we find. Additionally, we're going through some outside security exercises. So we have a contract in UK starting next week, starting to instrument fuzz testing on the proxy to make sure that our memory is safe in all the places we expect, that we can't be DOSed easily, et cetera. And next month, we'll be doing kind of more of a holistic security analysis, putting together a documented security model, especially for multi-cluster, and thinking through really the security, how to think about Linkerd security roadmap in general. And I've already kind of identified some areas for improvement there. But we'll be working with Trail of Bits on that. The main feature goal for 2.11, and so I guess 2.11 may be delayed somewhat based on these external interactions where we want to be responsive to security input and make sure that we're not kicking the can on that because we have feature work to do. All that said, 2.11, I think the main priority is going to be doing service-to-service authorization, which is issue 3342, so an old issue. That's going to work mostly by introducing server-side configuration, so all the policy is set on the target workloads of who can talk to me. And it will probably have a RFC to look at by the next time we talk about the kind of loose sketch for that plan. That will, and really, so really, there's a lot more we want to do in the policy space in terms of basically deprecating service profiles ultimately. I don't think that's something we'll do in 2.11. I think we'll want to try to make 211 smaller and push more of that into 212. So things like retry policies, circuit breaking, timeouts, all of that fits into this work that we want to start scoping, and we want to get a roadmap for that. But I don't want to gate figuring all of that out. I don't want to gate 211 on figuring all of that out. So 211 is going to be really narrowly focused on getting authorization support. And the current plan is to make it look a lot like RBAC. We want this to be something that really fits into the Kubernetes ecosystem tightly. And my hope is that we can just use RBAC and we don't have to implement a new CRD for the role binding piece of it, at least. And so that's kind of the early thought there. We'll get deeper into that once 210 is actually out the door. So I think in the next couple of weeks, that'll go from notebook to doc that we can start to get input on. So expect more there. And I think by the next time we talk, we'll have, as we figured out some of these core components, we'll have more of the roadmap based on that follows. But as I said, I think the themes going forward are security posture, making sure that we're set up to provide the security value that we promise. And two, to start providing more configuration surface area, especially around things like authorization policies, so that this becomes a little bit more flexible and fungible for folks that are doing, not just like install Linkerd and forget it modes where you're looking at it for a little bit more of a policy. And any questions on my rant? Okay. Feel free to email me or ping on GitHub. But like I said, we'll have more concrete docs up in the next couple of weeks. And then I definitely would appreciate some feedback when we have that going, and help me think through it and whether it's going to be painful for you or not.
Yeah, how can we stay in touch with the progress on that?
I think that issue 3342 is probably the place that we'll ping as we get updates there. But I also, it might be, like I said, if we had we have a mailing list, then I should probably ping the steering committee mailing list once some of these big design pieces move forward. I'll probably ping the users list as well, honestly.
Chris, do you ask because you have particular things you do and do not want to see?
I mean, this is something I've been interested in for a long time. We're looking at security groups for pods because we're on EKS, and we're also looking at Calico for certain things. So I'm just trying to get an idea of where this is going to fit in. And if I have any feedback, I'll definitely participate in the conversation.
Yeah. One of the other things I want to address here is kind of multi-tenancy at the control plane level. Right now, you can discover any pod in the cluster, and so that includes a lot of its metadata like labels. And part of getting that security posture improved and leaning on things like RBAC, I want to start limiting who can discover what, and making sure that this is kind of end-to-end feature and not just a network policy. It's also implies on the control plane how things are discovered.
All right, with 2 minutes remaining, we should probably wrap it up. Obviously, Oliver, Kevin, the rest of the maintainers, and little old me are available for follow-up questions and things over email or in the Slack or Discord. We should schedule the next one, but probably, we can do this over email rather than trying to do it live. But I think this time generally works for people, and this day generally works for people, so I'll try and keep it to that. I'll send out a couple options. Any final comments, questions, words of wisdom?
When can they expect to hear about graduation? In the next, probably before we meet next, would be the goal.
Yeah, I am highly incentivized. There's like one conversation that I need to have that's remaining. That's going to happen today, and if that goes well, then I'm going to start working on this immediately. And if it goes poorly, then well, I may have.
I will come back to you and ask for help.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So
Yeah, so just some of the context there is that there's a new TOC that was installed last month. And so we're trying to get earlier on their agenda so that before they're overwhelmed with graduation requests.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of what the graduation process is, but I've never participated in anything like that. Once we kick that off and you start sending these emails, would it make sense for us to have some kind of a strategy session on, approach, desired outcomes besides just graduating? Like, because I'm not super familiar with the politics and things like that involved with the CNCF, right?
yeah, I think primarily. So yes, I'm more than happy to do that. I think primarily what we will need from the folks on this call is kind of the advocacy as Linkerd users that this is a thing that's valuable to you. It's a thing that has been run in an open way, and that you don't have concerns about, buoyant taking the ball and running home, or you don't have concerns about the long-term kind of life of the project, or if you do, you have ways to address them. That kind of stuff is primarily what we'll need.
Yeah, there's a due diligence process, and we'll ideally love you to be available for that process to get them your honest feedback on the project.
Yeah, basically our strategy is we want to be as open and direct about everything that we've done in this project as possible. Okay, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, thank you, folks. Really appreciate everyone spending your time with us today. Feel free to reach out if any questions, comments, or concerns. Otherwise, it was really nice to see you all.
Thank you, guys.
Look for 210 very soon.
Uh-oh.
All right.
They
If
say
it hurts, do it
Thanks.
more often. Bye-bye.
See you soon.